Good morning and welcome. We are back to Senior English B, and our objectives this morning are to cover the Matthew Arnold poem, Dover Beach. This is in fact one of the more important poems of the Victorian period. You may jot that one down right away as being significant. And as we begin now to look at the poem itself, I want to ask a couple of quick questions of us. One of these is geographic in nature, because this is a poem that without some understanding of geography, we're going to struggle with. After that, we're then going to go to 2B, and we're going to make an observation about what kind of poem this is. We're going to call it a dramatic monologue as well. See, we've seen a number of these at 2B. We'll talk about that. Then, number 3, we'll go ahead and read this poem and begin the process of exegesis. If I have time at the end of the hour, I will turn to the second of these two offerings for us in the hymnal on page 1039, the To Marguerite continued text. And then, if we really have enough time, we'll get on to the poetry of A.E. Housman. If not, we'll pick up maybe with that conversation tomorrow. Now, Ms. Cruz is already pointing out what is self-evident about the picture of Mr. Matthew Arnold on 1034. Gotta love, they called those, believe it or not, sideboards. That large amount of hair, which is kind of like a cross between sideburns and Mr. Frederick's beard. You see how this works? So, I don't know. This was the style, you see, during the time period. Let's go ahead now and make an observation about this poem. First of all, Matthew Arnold, if you want to jot this down, Matthew Arnold is actually a really important voice, as was Tennyson for us, in discussing the concerns over the decline of England. Okay? So Arnold's also going to be a somewhat conservative voice here, asking what went wrong. Let's write that down. What went wrong? Arnold often will ask this question to English readers. What went wrong? Assuming then that something is going wrong, right? This is the old glass is half empty versus glass full dichotomy. For Arnold, yeah, half empty is for sure the way he sees things. Now, you're going to be writing here a week from now, and you're going to be considering this poem in some detail in contiguity to the other text that you were working with for Packet Writing Assessment 9. So it's really important that we know this poem. But let's start with the title, Dover Beach. Now, what does that even mean? Well, England is a rock that sits out in the middle of the ocean. It's a small rock, actually. You can drive across either direction, England, in just a matter of hours. On the eastern side of that rock faces towards the continent and France. The little body of water in between, they actually call the English Channel. Okay? You can actually, on clear days, and especially clear nights, you can actually see across the channel, that body of water, and you can actually see France from the English side, and conversely. Okay, you can see the lights or whatever. On the eastern side of England, there is a very interesting geographic construction, piece of geography, topography. The land of England will go beautiful green grass, lovely meadow, right to the edge in a certain part of the eastern side of England, and then it drops hundreds of feet down. It's a cliff. It's a remarkable cliff because the rock is predominantly white. Almost looks like chalk. This region is called Dover Beach. Now, for those of you that ever saw that, I almost said really bad, let's be fair to Kevin Costner. He made a film called Robin Hood many, many years ago that some of you maybe have seen. And at the beginning of that movie, he's stuck in some prison in Jerusalem. He's on crusade. He's Robin Hood. And then he escapes through a series of feats. And then the next thing we see him is in a boat. And the picture is on his face. And he clearly has this look on his face of great joy. And he actually gets out of the boat, steps into water up to his knees, and he starts walking. And then the camera angle switches. And it moves around behind him so that you can see what it is he's seeing. And what he's seeing are the cliffs of Dover. it tells him immediately, it's an iconic way to say to the audience, that he's home, he's in England. There's two things really interesting about the Cliffs of Dover, by the way. One, it's the #1 place in all of England to go to commit suicide. The reasons are obvious, self-evident. Once you step over the edge of this cliff, unless you've got some pretty nice set of wings on you, you're not coming back. That is to say, the fall is not so easy to come back from. It's a good place to go kill yourself if you need to, and it is a known place for that. In fact, we know in Shakespeare's great classic play, King Lear, the blind old man Gloucester has had enough of his life, and he decides to go kill himself, and the way he does it is how? By jumping off the cliffs of Dover. Of course, he's fooled into believing that he's done this, as his son, in disguise, is going to save his life. I'll let you read the play in your own time. The second, and some of you will smile, Mr. Nelson, you're going to smile at the irony of this, Dover Beach is also the #1 place where honeymooners like to go to honeymoon. So if you've been newly married, you go to Dover Beach. Mr. Ramos is putting two and two together. I suppose, Mr. Ramos, this means what? That if you get married and you go there for your holiday and you really don't like it, I guess you jump off the cliff. You see how that works, okay, right? And there's our view of marriage, Mr. Durant. All we'll say about that topic, okay? So if you know something about what I just said regarding it's this little place where honeymooners like to go, all over the top, right, there are these little cabins where honeymooners like to go, and they would stay there and do their thing, that kind of thing. Still to today, you know, you can go to England, you can visit the Cliffs of Dover. Now, interesting. There are two kinds of beaches. See, I have to teach this kind of stuff because a lot of my students grow up in the middle of desert, in the middle of mountains. And so they don't know that there are two kinds of beaches. There are two kinds of beaches in the world. The first kind of beaches are the ones that if you've been to a beach, you've probably been to these kind of beaches. They're made of sand. For example, if you've ever gotten on a plane and you went to Waikiki, Honolulu, then you know about this kind of beach. These are beaches where you step out onto its beautiful sand, you make little sand piles, that kind of thing, all right? The water breaks onto the beach and it's sand. Got me? The second kind of beach is the one that maybe some of you are not so familiar with, and yet probably is the more popular beaches in the world in terms of types. Not that people like to go to visit them, but we have far more of these kind of beaches in the world, and these are the beaches where there's rock. It's not sand, it's stone, rock, stone. So as the waves hit the rock, they'll move that rock back and forth, and the rock actually grinds against each other, and it has a far different sound from the sound of a beach, for example, off Waikiki or off the North Shore, for those of you that like to surf at Hawaii. Okay, totally different project entirely. Observation for your notes. At the bottom of the Cliffs of Dover, the beach is rock. It's not sand, it's rock. Okay, it's stone. To that degree, then, as the water falls onto the beach, it has a very strange sound. Here's why. The rock grinds against each other as the waves hit it, but then you've got hundreds of feet of cliff. So the sound reverberates back up these cliffs, so that when you're standing at the top of the Cliffs of Dover, it's a very strange, dare we say it, eerie kind of sound. Now, when the ocean is nice and still, you don't hear much of this. But when the waves start to pound against the water, you'll get weird sounds that kind of echo and come up the Cliffs of Dover. If you don't understand what I just said, much of this poem isn't going to make much sense to you. That's why I've taken your time to try to explain it. I suppose we could have gotten on a plane and just flown to England, gotten off the plane at Heathrow, and we could have taken a little drive to Dover Beach, but it seemed to me this was faster, you see. Mr. Ramos says, I'm going to graduate from high school, make a lot of money so that I can go visit it someday. Not a bad idea. Might want to take Ralph Lutner with you, you see. Now, let's talk for a few moments about the poem itself at 2B. Let's write this down. This poem is a dramatic monologue. Now, we've been in this territory before. Jot down at 3A, for example, some of the popular poems we've worked with in the Victorian era that were dramatic monologues. Do you remember any of them? Name one that was a Ulysses. Outstanding, Mr. Amos. Ulysses. Tennyson's classic At Little Profits That an Idle King by This Still Hearth and all of that, right? What was another one? Do you remember? That's right. My Last Duchess. The Browning Offering, as well as Porphyria's Lover. I used to love her, but I had to kill her, and all of that, right? All of those are as well dramatic monologues. Let's make a note. This is also a dramatic monologue. Question, what is a dramatic monologue? Well, there's kind of two things, right? One, speaker. That's why we call it mono. And there is some kind of dramatic context that's involved. By dramatic here, we don't mean ninth grade Worland High School drama. That's not what we're talking about. But rather, we're talking about something is going on. The one way I like to say this, Mr. Nelson, is that there's some kind of speaker and then there's some kind of listener. Most of the time, there's some kind of listener. There's somebody else who's there, but usually never says anything, but is inferred in some way. This will definitely be true for this poem. Okay? Now, having said all of that, let's take a look at the poem and read it. Okay? So we're now ready to do the next thing I said we were going to do. We're going to exegete the poem by beginning, first of all, to read the poem, and then we will come back to do some better understanding of the poem. By the way, just see it laid out on the page there, and identify right away that we have multiple stanzas. Suggestion here, Miss Swalstead. Anytime you see a poem laid on the page with stanzas, I always recommend that you number those stanzas in some way. I'm not saying write in your book, unless you're writing with pencil that you can remove the ink or the lead. But for sure, you want to write down in level 1, stanza 1, stanza 2, stanza 3, stanza 4, so that when you're taking your notes, you're able to get some sense of what the 4 stanzas are saying and how they kind of work together. All right? We'll definitely do this with Miss Mueller as we get into this poem. Let's start, first of all, though, with just a read of the poem, Dover Beach. So you should be now with me on 1036. Let's read the poem together. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of Dover stand glimmering and vast out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen. You hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling up their return. Up the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulance cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another. For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. We are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Now let's begin by first of all pointing out that this poem will have an identifiable movement that will begin in stanza 1. Right away we're going to ask simple questions. Who is speaking and who is the speaker speaking to? Notice the opening lines. The sea is calm tonight. We don't have a storm. Where are we, by the way? What's the title of the poem? Right, Dover Beach. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. We can look out across the English Channel, and we can perceive the lights on the other side, which we will call England, right? Notice the cliffs of Dover stand glimmering and vast out in the, notice the adjective, tranquil bay. What is tranquil? Tranquility? Peace, isn't it? Right? It's peaceful, it's calm. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Now we're 5 lines into this poem. Jot down in your notes at least 2 things that we recognize. How would you say the mood or the opening of the poem is? Whoever is speaking We'll say what about what it's like outside? Is it wretched?
It's looking pretty good.
It's very nice, isn't it? Continue, though, with better language than pretty good. And find specific examples from the poem. What is it that he says about peaceful? Mr. Ramos says, good, keep going. What else? What would you say?
He's almost talking with like admiration.
Quiet, beautiful, admiration. Wow. He goes, hey, it's really beautiful out here. Then line 6. Notice what he says. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. In other words, what's he say about the way the air smells? Ah, it's nice. All of this is very nice. But uh-oh, wait a second. Arnold is going to be playing a bit of a game with us. So that right away in the first 6 lines he says, who's the he, do you imagine? Guy or girl? Guy. And he says at line 6, come over to the window. It's nice outside. Could you imagine he's speaking to? By the 5th stanza, or I'm sorry, by the 4th stanza, we'll have figured out, love, let us be true to one. He's talking to his girl, isn't he? Now wait a second. Point out something geographically in regards to the way this is set up. We had to do this with Porphyria's lover as well, right? Where do you imagine he's standing? By the window. Come over to the window. It's nice outside. Looking through the window, he describes what he sees. It's tranquil. It's beautiful. You have the lights glimmering over on France, on the coastline. Everything looks so nice. Hey, girlfriend, come over to the window means what, though, about where she is? Is she standing next to him? Ah, Keller's putting it down. Ah, he wouldn't have to tell his girl to come over to the window and stand next to him if his girl was standing next to him. Let's write it in our notes. Very subtle, very subtle. Matthew Arnold is telling us the guy is speaking to a girl who is not standing next to him. Where do you imagine she is? Where do you imagine she is? If she's not standing next to him, where is she then? She is, that's right, she's somewhere other than that next to him. In other words, the girl is somehow separated from him physically, but in the same locale. So that he can say to her, hey, come over to the window, it's nice out here. Right? Now we keep going. Only, hey girlfriend, come over to the window, it's really pretty out here. Only, we might say except, only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land. What time of the evening? We're in the evening, right? Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles, which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin with tremulance cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Now again, Mr. Rothlinder, you're not, this stanza is not going to make much sense if you don't know the topography of Dover Beach, right? Remember, I told you, there's 2 kind of beaches. There's sandy beaches and then there's rocky beaches. Clearly, Dover Beach is a rocky beach. Hey, girlfriend, it's beautiful out here. Come over to the window. Everything is so nice. Well, with the exception of the sound. What does the word grating mean? If you're around some little 7th grader who is grating on you, what does that mean? Yappity, 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 annoying. Hey, girlfriend, come over to the window. It's really nice outside. Well, with the exception of the sound of that water hitting on the beach, that's kind of grating. And then look at the last line of the first stanza. Letting what in? The eternal note of sadness. Oh, wait a minute. By the way, this is one of the great love songs, love poems of the Victorian period. It is. But notice how it begins. Hey, girlfriend, it's really beautiful outside. Come over to the window since you're not standing next to me. And everything is so nice with the exception of that sound. That sound bugs me. And it is grating. And it brings in the eternal note of sadness. The poem starts out with, yay, it's so beautiful. And the first stanza ends with what?
Oh, dear.
Now, some girls have dated guys like this. They're just downers all the way around, right? Come over to the window, it's really nice. Well, with the exception of that wretched sound. I don't like that sound. That grating sound makes it sad for me. And then there's a stanza break. Notice we continue. Sophocles long ago. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean Sophocles long ago? Well, Matthew Arnold is highly educated. He is assuming that you, as a reader of this poem, will know who Sophocles is. Now, let's point out something for your notes. In the history of Greek thought, we have two cats that sound very similar in name. There is Socrates and there is Sophocles, and we don't want to confuse the two. Socrates is the great philosopher who taught Plato, and of course Plato taught Aristotle. That's Socrates. Sophocles is who? Now some of you will immediately be able to start writing down lists of titles on 3A, because Sophocles you actually have been introduced to earlier in high school. Rothler, do you remember? There's this girl who has two bros. They fight each other and kill each other, actually, outside the walls of Thebes. There is a law which is made by the king, his name is Creon, that one of the two brothers, Itocles, will be properly buried. The other body, Polynices, he will not get a formal burial, and the sister has to decide whether to bury the body of her bro. She decides to bury the body of her bro, she gets jacked. There's only one problem. It just so happens that her lover happens to be the son of the king who made this stupid rule. His name is Haman. Creon's boy is Haman. Any lights going on yet?
Yes.
What play are we talking about? Who is this girl, this heroine, who at the end of the play is going to be condemned, first of all, to be stoned to death? Creon backs up a bit and says, no, we won't stone her to death. We'll just lock her up in a cave and let her starve herself to death. Only in the cave, Haman, her lover, comes to rescue her, but this girl, Antigone, she can't deal with being locked up. Must have been claustrophobic. And so she goes ahead and she hangs herself. Creon shows up right about the time Haman shows up, dad and son. Creon says to Haman, his boy, hey, don't go in there. That's a dangerous, you don't need to go. Creon meets Haman. Haman tries to kill his own father. Talk about your dysfunctional family. When he realizes he can't, he turns the sword on himself and he kills himself. In the meantime, Creon's wife, who happens to be Haman's mother, gets news that her boy has killed himself. She goes and kills herself.
Oh my God.
That is this.
Right? And by the end of the poem, Creon shows up again. Everybody's dead. Antigone kills herself. Haman kills himself. Mom kills herself. Creon shows up with the body of his son and says, I think I'm going to go out and see how that works. The author of this little ditty is named Sophocles. Of course, some of you know a better play even than that. In fact, Aristotle argued it was the single best play of all time. It's the play about the chap who is born, left out on the mountain to die alone, doesn't die, is found by a shepherd, raised in another town where he is told, you are a cursed man. You're going to grow up to kill your dad, marry your mom, and have 4 children by your mom. He doesn't want that to happen, and so he leaves town. At the crossroads, he has this old man who's driving his caddy in the middle of the road. They get into a fight. He kills the old man, goes down the road, answers the riddle of the Sphinx, answers it, removes the curse on the city of Thebes. The queen of the city is reported to have just lost her husband, the king. She decides, hey, why don't you marry me and we can have 4 children. His name is what? What's it? Oedipus. That's right, Oedipus. And Oedipus marries his wife, Mother Jacusta, and has 4 children. By the way, one of those children's name was? Antigone, right, okay. And in the end of the play, right, Oedipus finds out that, no, really, he did kill his dad. He did marry his mom. He did have 4 children with his mother. To find his wife, Mother, she's not there on stage. What has she done? She's run off to the bedroom where she has... Yeah, you're kind of getting the sense here. This is Sophocles. Okay, this is Sophocles. So what can we say now in your notes about good old Sophocles? What do you want to say about this cat? What kind of writer is he? Yay! Man, if you really want to be uplifted, this is the guy you sit down to... No. Sophocles is the writer of human misery. Let's just put it in our notes that way. I use that word misery for a specific reason. And Matthew Arnold will come back to that word as well. Sophocles long ago. Are you with me now? Isn't it interesting how if you know 1 or 2 things, the poem starts to go and open up for you? Watch this. Hey, girlfriend, it's so nice outside, especially the night air is so... Come to the window, it's so nice. Well, with the exception of that sound. That's that sound of the ocean. That one just grates on my nerves and makes me sad. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean. It what? What's the antecedent to the pronoun it?
Sound.
The sound of what? Now, if you've ever traveled to, for example, Athens, where Sophocles, of course, would have been somewhat known, the ocean next to Athens is what ocean? What's that body of water?
Mediterranean.
The Mediterranean Ocean. The majority of the Mediterranean Ocean, and you would know this if you visited Athens, because you would be right there next to the harbor, you could see the majority of the ocean of the Mediterranean. What kind of beach do you imagine it is? Sandy or rocky?
Rocky.
It is actually rocky. It is actually rocky because so much of that region was volcanic and therefore rocky, okay? So here we go. Sophocles long ago heard that wretched sound of the ocean on the Aegean. By the way, what's the Aegean? Do you know what that is? Notice it's capitalized. What is Aegean? Aegean is, yeah, another name for Mediterranean Ocean, right? The ocean. And it brought into his mind the sound of the ocean, the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. Every time Sophocles listened to the ocean and the waves falling on the ocean, what does turbid mean?
Morbid.
It means spinning, turning, spinning. Ebb and flow, back and forth. That's what waves do, don't they? Sophocles, he says, long ago Sophocles heard this sound, and it immediately reminded him of human what? What's the word?
Misery.
Misery. What is that word? Jot that word down in your notes and define it. What is the word misery? So, for example, if we were to say about today, Monday, it's a miserable Monday, what would we be saying about it? Good or bad? Really wretched. Yeah, really wretched, huh, right? Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. And all of a sudden it becomes fairly clear to the reader, if this is a love poem, it's definitely a different kind of love poem. Hey, girlfriend, it's really beautiful outside. Come over to the window. Oh, with the exception of the sound of the ocean. That kind of makes me sad. And it reminds me a lot of what Sophocles said about every time he heard the ocean. Every time he heard the sound of the ocean, he was reminded that humans have misery in their life. Stanza 2. Stanza 3. The sea of faith was once two at the full, and round earth's shore like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges, dreary and naked shingles of the world. Now wait a minute. This stanza is not as difficult as it first appears. Notice that the phrase, sea of faith, is capitalized. We want to put that in our notes. That's significant. Notice, sea of faith is capitalized. Sea of faith? I know what sea the Aegean Sea or the Mediterranean Sea is, or the Atlantic Sea, which of course right now is about to whip up a little storm for all of us on the eastern sea. I know about those seas, but the sea of faith? Jot down what you think that even means. Read a sidebar to maybe help you figure that one out. Sea of faith? What is the sea of faith, Miss Benitez? What is that? Miss Benitez, you should be with me on 1036, and then you should be looking specifically at this language. Sea of faith. Miss Mueller maybe will help you here. The sea of faith. I know what the sea, the Atlantic Sea is. What is the sea of faith, Miss Mueller? You got any idea? What is that?
Traditional religious beliefs.
What is religious beliefs?
I don't know.
What is that?
This is what it says.
What is a religion? What does it mean, religious beliefs?
Something that you believe in.
What's our word today? What is the word we use on Sunday if you're going to? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Belief in a church. Belief in a religion. Look what he says. The sea of faith was once two at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. sea of faith was once two at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. First of all, let's step on the word girdle for just a moment. Now, in the old days, women wore girdles. These things were put around their middle to try and hold in their tummies. That's called a girdle. Okay? A girdle is a support that goes around. That's all the word means, though. It doesn't have to mean clothing necessarily. It can just mean a support. For example, the very old-fashioned word for football pads was actually the girdle. It's not used as much anymore because guys were like, dude, I don't wear girdles, girls wear girdles. But the word itself actually just means support. Go back and look at the lines. The sea of faith was once two at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. Put in your own words, what's he say about religion and religious beliefs? Mr. Durant, what does Mr. Arnold say in this poem about religious belief? The sea of faith was once two at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its long withdrawing roar. What does he say about belief in religion? At one point, used to what?
Believe.
People used to believe in religion. And what did it do for them? It supported them the way a what? The way a girdle would. It supported them the way a girdle would. There was a time when people believed in religion. But now what?
Not so much.
Right, and it's at this point that a reader of this poem goes, oh, this is something more than a simple love poem. Matthew Arnold is making an observation about what went wrong in Victorian England. What went wrong in Victorian England, according to Matthew Arnold? What happened to the sea of faith? What happened to the capacity to believe things? Think back to my shoe factory story with Mr. Nelson and Miss Keller. Remember, and their 8 children? Nelson gets jacked from his job at the shoe factory. He's got to go home and tell his wife and 8 children, I just got fired from my job. What if Mr. Nelson was a real believer in religion and God? He might over time begin to what? Have what? What's the word? Let's write it in our notes. Doubts, right? Mr. Nelson might think like, for example, what? Wait a minute, I've always been a good guy. I've always believed in the right stuff, but now I lost my job. I begin to wonder, Mr. Nelson might say, I begin to wonder if everything... Wait a minute. The sea of faith was once two at the full. See it? See how I'm breaking it now and putting it back for you? The sea of faith was once two at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now, we're in the present day, I only hear its long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Where is the capacity to believe, Mr. Durant? According to this poem, where did it go? Away, just like the ocean goes away, right? He says there was a time when people really believed in stuff. They kind of had comfort. His word is girdle, support. But now, it's all gone. Wait a minute, let's unpack now and put back together. Hey, girlfriend, it's really beautiful outside. Oh, well, with the exception of that wretched sound of that water. It reminds me of what Sophocles said long ago, and he said every time he heard the ocean, it was like human misery. There used to be a sea, a different sea, the sea of faith, religion, and it used to comfort everyone, but not anymore. Now it's gone. Whoa! How do we go from there now to the last stanza? It only gets better. We might say worse. Take a look at the last stanza. Ah, love. Now he's back to his girl. Ah, love, let us be true to one another! Exclamation mark. And now we're back to the love poem again. Oh, love, let us be true to one another. But look what he says next. For the world, which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really nigh